I'm Ray Edwards, and this is the What the Speak podcast.
What the Speak, episode 32. What is up, man?
Do you kick ass when you speak, present, or pitch? If not, these expert discussions and insider tips can help you right now, today. Welcome to the What the Speak podcast. I'm your host, Brian Kelly.
Struggling with feeling comfortable in front of an audience when you present? Or maybe you're confident, but you have difficulty stumbling over filler words like and ah. Well, you can start kicking ass today by signing up for our weekly VIP updates. As a bonus, you'll also receive 11 free tips that will uncover 6 psychological secrets to public speaking, plus 5 tips on how to stop using filler words. Go to whatthespeak.com/VIP. Ray Edwards, are you ready to answer the question, what the speak?
I was born ready.
All right. I love it. I love it. All right, Ray. So you're a direct response copywriter with clients like Tony Robbins, Jack Canfield, Jeff Walker, and Frank Kern, to name a few. You're also the author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, Writing Riches. Plus, on top of that, you're a frequent speaker. But let's hear it directly from you. Can you briefly tell us about who you are and what you do?
Well, I am, as you said, an author, a speaker, a copywriter. I, in essence, help people sell more of whatever they sell, whether that be products, services, books, or ideas.
Perfect. I like that. It's very succinct. You've practiced this, haven't you?
A time or two, yes.
That's your elevator pitch. I got it. All right, Ray. So what is the specific topic or topics that you usually present on when you go and speak before an audience?
Usually it's about how to write persuasively in order to sell your products or your services or your ideas. And people have a mistaken notion that writing persuasively means either you're going to write some great literary work or you're going to write some cheesy sales copy that's pushy and hypey and that turns people off. And I think that there's a medium in between of communicating helpful, useful information in a way that leads people to making a buying decision. And they may be buying into the yes idea or they may be buying into the no idea as it regards your product or service. It doesn't matter. I just want to put you in a place where you're ready to make a decision.
Well, Ray, I've seen you present live, and we'll dig into like the specifics of how you give a presentation. But I was really impressed with how you craft the information that you share as well as deliver it. Now, aside from copywriting, is there anything else that you talk about before an audience? A specific area of expertise that you've gathered over your years in copywriting and obviously in the broadcast industry?
Well, I like to talk about the fact that copywriting is just one part of an overall process that we lead people through when we're marketing anything, whether it be a church or a business or a set of ideas or a nonprofit. And so that encompasses lots of things. People may hire me as a copywriter initially, although technically I'm not even for hire for that kind of work anymore. But that's how I got started. But what we discovered was they retained me because of expertise and because of a certain way of looking at the marketing process that involved more than just writing copy. And that grew out of working with people on the copy and getting the copy right, but things still weren't working. And why weren't they working? Well, it might have been because of the context in which the copy was presented, like just physically the way the website looked or the way the mailing piece looked. Or it might be something bigger and broader in scope, like, does this offering align with the core values of my customer? Does it align with the best needs of my customer? And so I'm a person of faith. I work with lots of ministers and churches and Christian authors, and anybody who knows anything about me knows that I'm a follower of Jesus Christ. I don't require that of anybody else. So my faith is a source of great inspiration for me. It's a source of creativity, of spontaneity, and also of the value that I bring to the relationship with a client or with a student or someone that I'm mentoring or coaching or consulting with.
Perfect. Okay. Well, Ray, let's transition to the next portion of our discussion where we explore your origin story as a speaker. Now, the first thing I'd love to talk about with you is exactly how did you get into public speaking? Was it something that has recently been something you've been involved with? Is it something that stems out of your long career in the radio business? I would love to hear from you how you got into this.
Well, I actually got started speaking when I was in high school. I was in something called the Future Farmers of America, and they had a contest. And I was the least likely guy to be in that club. It just happened to fill an elective. And they had this public speaking track called extemporaneous speaking. I didn't even know what the word extemporaneous meant, but it turns out it meant they gave you a topic and you had 5 minutes to prepare a 5-minute speech, and then you gave the speech.
Yep.
And it turned out I was pretty good at it, and I just fell in love with it. And I came at the whole speaking area with the idea, because of that experience, that it was easy and you could just do it at the drop of a hat. So I think a lot of the hangups that other people have about speaking are things they've been taught. I happen to just have been taught something different.
Mm-hmm. So would you say that that's kind of like your natural proclivity, or just kind of the makeup of your personality, that you've had that natural disposition?
I think so. I think we each have certain natural components of our personality, of our makeup, and those factors I believe, are changeable. I don't think you're either a speaker or you're not a speaker. I think you can definitely learn and improve your skills. But I think, yes, I was born with just a natural tendency to be pretty good at that.
Yeah, my background is kind of similar in that sense that, I've always loved getting up in front of an audience and speaking or performing or whatever it is. And that has kind of allowed me, it was kind of an open, easy door for me to go into, to start getting into speaking as well. Now, the thing that I found, and I don't know if this is true for you or not, is that for a while there, especially in the earlier days, I relied on that a little bit too much. I thought, I don't need to prepare. I can just show up and do something off the cuff and it'll be brilliant. And learned pretty quickly that no, there's a lot of preparation that goes into it, a lot of planning, a lot of thinking, so that you can deliver the most clear, concise, and impactful message as you can.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I think it happens to a lot of us who are just naturally good at, or probably more accurately, just naturally enjoy being in front of other people and speaking. We tend to think we can just wing it and we're going to do great. And what I found is when things really started to take off for me was when I was able to put my ego in check and realize I had things to learn and that I could get better and I could be more concise and I could hone those skills. And I would submit to anyone who speaks in any capacity whatsoever that taking the time and the ego check that's necessary to get better at the skill of speaking is an investment that will pay off for you, particularly if you're good at it, in multiples.
Yeah, and I think the thing that's really beautiful about this, or a takeaway for the audience, for those of you who might be struggling with speaking, it's work for everybody. For some, it's a little bit easier to feel, I guess, more carefree in front of an audience than others. But it certainly, for all of us, takes a certain amount of work, a certain amount of effort to get up and speak your mind in a clear, concise way. So, Ray, yes. I would love to kind of segue into what is one area that you've struggled with, whether it was in those early days in high school when you first found that you had this kind of natural gift, or even something today that you feel like you still struggle with or that you want to improve.
It's the need to. This is actually going to be a very self-revelatory answer, which I know is what you're looking for, but I don't know that I was prepared to give this answer. It's the constant need of the approval of the audience, because on the one hand, I want to be cognizant of what my audience needs from me, how I can deliver the best service to them, whoever I'm speaking to, whether it's a group of 10 or a group of 10,000. On the other hand, I have to be careful of not playing to the audience in order to feed my own ego, my own sense of self-worth. And a friend of mine, I don't know that I agree with him, but there's some truth to what he says. He says that speakers are the neediest bunch of people I've ever met in my life. And, there's something that drives us to get on stage because none of us were drafted into this. We all decided to do it at one point or another. And so I think it's worth asking, at least for me, it's been worth asking, well, what is it that drives that? And whatever it is, I don't want to make anybody wrong. I just want to say, well, how can I turn that in service to the people who've given up their time and attention to me for this period?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a good insight. And thanks for sharing that, Ray. I mean, we oftentimes talk about really focusing on the audience and what they need. But there is that dangerous line that I think for many of us who have that pitfall of having our ego stroked because the audience loves what we have to say is something that you should watch out for it. And I think it does continue to circle back to this idea of it's not about you, it's about your audience. Yes, if the audience loves what you say, great, you've made that connection with them, but continue to keep that focus on them versus, I'm pretty good at what I do. I think I deserve a pat on the back. So.
I was speaking at a conference, this has been a couple of years ago, and the guy ahead of me was talking about, he gave a talk that was very popular, and a lot of it was filled with great things, such as you've got to think of your audience first, you've got to put your audience ahead of your own needs, and so forth. And after his presentation, all he could talk about was backstage. How did I look? I noticed that when I said this, the audience reacted this way. What do you think about that? Should I change that? And I just thought it was interesting, and I've tried to obscure the details enough so that nobody, even this person, will be able to guess who I'm talking about. But it was just so ironic. I thought, dude, you just gave a talk about focusing on the audience, and all you're focused on is yourself.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because, especially for those of us that are committed to continually improving and honing what it is that we do when we deliver content in a public manner, we're always wanting to pay attention to those finer details so that we can get better and get better and get better. But it is, again, just stressing that it can be a dangerous pitfall to where you fall in and you start focusing more on you as the speaker versus what it is that you give your audience. I mean, you could be the most polished professional speaker that there is out there, but unless you're making a real, true, authentic connection with your audience, it's not going to go quite as far or have the same amount of impact. So, very important lessons. So, Ray, let's transition now to the portion of our discussion where we talk about your exact expertise. And I know that you've got 25 years in the broadcast industry. I'm curious, are there any lessons that you've learned from that experience on how to keep audiences engaged and entertained?
It really comes down to you've got to keep talking about them. I know that especially for those of us who are attempting to teach while we speak, and that's not always the aim of speaking. Sometimes the aim is just to motivate or to encourage, and that's a different kind of speech. But if you're trying to teach, especially, it's easy to get focused on the material and lose focus on the people and what the benefit of the material is to them. And so I know it sounds cliche, but it really is the difference between the kind of speaker that leaves people saying, I was entertained, thank you, and forgetting about you when you leave, or being the speaker who, when you leave, those people are changed. They change the way they live a certain portion of their lives because of what you spoke, and it's a change for the better. And that's what I have found engages people. And people know. There's a friend of mine in the radio business who told a story to me one time about having lunch with a very important radio executive. And they went to a restaurant where there was a mirror on the wall behind one of the seats. And it happened to be the seat my friend was sitting in. And I said, well, what was having lunch with this guy like? And he said, it was like he was having lunch with himself because he kept looking at himself in the mirror. And I think we as speakers are, again, so focused on our own performance sometimes that the audience may not realize that's what's happening consciously, but subconsciously they do. And you can always tell because people start to look at their watch, they start to shuffle in their seat, and at least have enough presence in the moment to notice, what are the people I'm speaking to doing? How are they reacting right now?
Yep. So, I've seen you, do things in a way. It's not being, a showman, so to speak, but there's things that you've done to fully engage the audience, to lead them in a way or down a path that you want to take them. And I'm curious, is there like, specific techniques or tactics that you go about building into your presentations to do that?
Yes, there are. You saw a demonstration of that, and there's a certain quiz that I gave people at the beginning of that presentation that you saw, and I hesitate to explain exactly what the quiz was because it's kind of a setup for a point that I'm trying to make.
Yep.
But the idea can be used by anybody in any speech, and that is, give them a question or a quiz and make it visual. And if you're using slides, then that's easy to do. If you're not using slides, you have to be theatrical, and you can do it with or without slides. Frankly, I prefer speaking without slides, but that's not always possible or practical.
Yep.
And so I build in quizzes, questions, I build in pictures. I often, if I'm really confident about the technical side of the house, I will often use video clips as a way of engaging people. And I try to space those out during the presentation. I find that people's attention begins to wander after about 7 to 10 minutes. You can give the most compelling talk in the world, but after about 7 minutes, you start to get the eyes glazing over and the people settling back in their seats. So I want to give them something to visually stimulate them. And we all love to watch TV, so that's the easiest way to do it.
Fantastic. Okay, so the other question related to your background and your expertise is, when I was sitting in your session, I felt like school is in session. Ray Edwards is speaking. We're going to learn something. So how do you personally bake in, these actionable items, this actionable material into your presentations? You talked a little bit about, some of the techniques that you use to keep audiences engaged, but I'm really curious to find out, how do you make these presentations to where, people are furiously writing in their notebooks and wanting to capture everything that you're sharing with them so that they can go and put it to use when they get back to their home and their office?
Lots of pain and suffering. I did many presentations where I saw the opposite things happening, and I had other people give me feedback and say, where am I losing the audience? And so this is not being focused on myself. It's being focused on, if people are giving me an hour of their attention and I'm boring them, I'm not serving them. I need to figure out what I'm doing that is not serving them and how I can change that. And so I try to bake in a rhythm. If you've read the Nancy Duarte's book, Resonate, where she breaks down the rhythm of great speeches. So I like to bake in the rhythm, the peaks and valleys into the presentation. And most importantly, I want to give people, when I'm teaching, I want to give them not just information, but actions they could take right now, if not during the presentation itself. Like in the presentation you saw me give, I was talking about writing copy, and I wanted to give people templates so that they could write the copy for their product or their service or their blog post right on the spot. And I just find that if you give people ideas that sound good and sound wise, they often take them home and put them on a shelf, and they become shelf help, which is no help because it stays on the shelf until you throw it away 3 years later.
So, that's something that I'd learned too, was when I would give a presentation and I would tell great stories, I would share some really great concepts, people would say, that was really good. However, I felt like, I was missing just like the meat of what it is that you were communicating. And so after I started, reflecting on that, I began putting in almost the ABC 1, 2, 3 into my presentation. So I would still do the same approach, but I would outline and map out specifically, if you want to achieve this, here's an example. You want to achieve X, Y, and Z, here's the steps. People would write it down.
Absolutely.
And when I started doing that, people were just like, oh my gosh, this was the most phenomenal thing that I've ever heard or seen. Thank you so much. And I thought, wow, that's hilarious. Just that little adjustment to give them information that they can say, okay, this is it. Like, I've got the points right here. This is what I'm going to go and do. And then, of course, like you said, what often happens is that then they go back and they put that on the shelf, and maybe they implement one thing that you gave them, but a lot of times then it does just get left. But the impression that's made and maybe the inspiration that occurs as a result of that does have a big impact. So it's pretty interesting.
Yes. I have to give credit to my wife, who saw me speak once and said, it was great, honey, but it just was so abstract.
Yep.
What are they supposed to do with that?
Yep.
Who else gives you that kind of feedback?
Yeah, my wife is the same way. Well, Ray, we're going to wrap things up and move into my favorite portion of our discussion. That's the rapid fire Q&A. We're just going to do maybe half dozen questions real quick. Think of the first thing that comes to your mind. The first one here that we've got, you did touch upon briefly, but I'll ask again. Do you prefer slides or no slides?
No slides.
And then why do you prefer no slides?
Because I believe that I tend to lean on the slides too much. If I don't have slides, I'm much more engaged with my audience because I've got nothing else to focus on.
Yep. No net to catch you.
Correct.
Okay, so who's one speaker that inspires you the most and why?
Tony Robbins, because he has such incredible passion, to use a word that he uses a lot, and an ability to captivate people. Even people who don't like him can't help but be captivated by him when he speaks.
Yep, absolutely. I agree. Okay, so the other thing I want to ask you is, what's the craziest, funniest, silliest thing that's ever happened to you when you've been on stage giving a presentation or at the front of a room?
I flew to Detroit, Michigan to speak at a marketing conference. There were about 500 people in the room. And right at the most crucial point of my presentation, the hotel fire alarm went off and everybody fled from the room.
That's pretty good. Ray, how big of an impact has speaking had on your career and your business?
I don't know how to estimate it. It's been huge. If I had not chosen to be a speaker, I would not have the same level of success. I would not have the same level of variety of contact with people. The people that I've met who've influenced my life, my career, even my family and my faith. I wouldn't have had any of those experiences had I not stepped out into the world and stepped up onto the stage as a speaker.
That's powerful. Okay, so winding things down here, I would love to know, when you first got started, what is one piece of advice that you wish you had received, something that you now know that you wish you would have known back then?
Invest in direct, painful coaching on your speaking as early as possible. I suffered from two mindsets that stopped me from doing that. One was I thought I knew everything. That's a bad place to be, because when you think you know everything, you've chosen exactly where you're just going to level off.
Yep.
And the second bad mindset to fall into was it seemed like a lot of money to invest in coaching or speaker training, but it's really, I think, the best investment you can make.
Fantastic. Well, Ray, we'll have all the links to your website, your social media profiles, and any other resources like your book in the show notes over at whattospeak.com. So Ray, I want to truly and sincerely thank you for your time, your expertise, as well as your personal stories and insights that you've shared with us. You're someone who truly kicks ass when they speak, present, or pitch.
Thank you very much. It was my honor and privilege to be here.
Thank you. Today's guest certainly had some amazing insights they shared. If you'd like to purchase a copy of their latest book, visit this episode's show notes over at whatthespeak.com and click the link at the bottom of the page to immediately order their book.
All right, here we go with the outro.
Thanks so much for joining us today on What to Speak. Be sure to visit whatthespeak.com for show notes on every episode and to sign up for our email list to stay updated on resources that'll help you kick ass when you speak, present, or pitch.